Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Surprised by Art. My name is Kirk. I'm the editor-in-chief of Troubadour magazine, and I'm going to surprise each of you with a poem.
And my name is Luc, and I'm the author of Touching the Art, a guide to enjoying art at a museum. And I'm going to surprise all of you, and you, Kirk, with a painting.
And today we have a really interesting topic. Before we get into the topic, I think you had a couple of announcements for the show for the next couple of weeks, and we have a special announcement for next week. So you want to tell us what the special announcement is?
Yeah, absolutely. So next week, we're going to shake things up a little bit, Kirk, and we're going to have a special guest join us to participate in being surprised by the poetry and the painting. So look forward to that. There'll be 3 topics. We'll mention those topics at the end that you'll get the chance to vote on in the Facebook group. And yeah, I think that'll be fun.
That'll be really good. So we have a special guest next week. And then we also have a quick announcement that we get involved now because we're going to take a break in 4 weeks. In 4 weeks, we're going to take a break. So as we said at the beginning of the first episode, this is going to be a summer session show, and we'll kind of talk about what we'll do after that. But I think what is at the end of July, essentially, will be the last show we'll do for beginning of August for this session of 10 episodes.
So total of 10 episodes, and the last one to come out, I think the last date will be Thursday, August 13th, will be number 10.
Okay, yeah. So we'll go into August, and then the school session starts. So we'll or soon thereafter, and got to prep for it and everything. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about what we'll do later. But those are our announcements, and now let's get into the topic. The topic is
That's
secular.
How you introduce it.
Yeah, you like that?
Okay. Wait. Let's have a revelatory moment for this topic.
Yeah, I don't know how to. I didn't know how to transition into that.
The topic is
secular revelation.
Okay. Secular revelation.
And secular. So this was by Ashley Roy. She actually gave this to us a couple weeks ago, I think, as a topic. Several weeks ago, and it was voted, it tied, I think, at that time, and it was voted second. So, no, it didn't tie. It was like right underneath the first one by like one vote or something like that. So we put it up there again, and it blew all the other ones out of the water. Most people wanted to hear about this topic, and it's a really interesting topic, secular revelation. So what do what is that? And she put it in quotation, the secular part, which I found interesting too, right? So not quotations, parentheses, sorry.
There you go.
So parentheses, the secular, and then revelation. So what does that bring to mind for you?
Well, I love this topic, and I think I voted for it the first time it came out too. And maybe the first way to think about it is to think about religious and mystical revelation, what we think about when that comes up. And for me, this is a huge subject in art. Revelation, mystical revelation is a really important one. And some of my favorite artworks have this kind of moment. If you want to Google Saint Teresa and Ecstasy by Gian Lorenzo Bernini, oh my goodness, that's the kind of revelation that I want to have all the time. It's orgasmic. She is just really taking in the word of God through the piercing arrows of the archangel Gabriel, whatever angel is there shooting arrows into her as her eyes turn back into her head and her mouth parts in agony of ecstasy. I guess it's Bernini's predecessor, Michelangelo. Ecstasy. But yeah, so there are all kinds of artists, Renaissance artists, Baroque artists, and a lot of Christian elements that show up in art have to do with revelation. So it's there. Yeah. But thinking about it in terms of what does secular revelation mean? That's been an interesting topic for me, and I've got some thoughts, but I'm curious about you, Kirk. What comes to mind for you first, or are there any particular movies or works of literature that had some, not maybe revelation general, or maybe the secular variant?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to you, this is a very interesting topic to me. To some degree, for this show, it's something that was a little bit scary to me, which is why I did not vote for it the first time. Because I did a whole series of shows called Sunday Morning Poetry, where I tried to bring, the secular, aspect to divinity, to hold like these religious topics and these religious ideas that tend to be couched in purely religious dogma, and try to bring it down to a secular, meaning. And it's why I love the Romantics so much, is because that's kind of what their project was they were trying to do away with religion in a sense and try to bring these topics down to the level of our perceptual awareness in this earth. Mm-hmm. And but when so for me, the topic secular or revelation actually happened, when I first started thinking about it when I was like 20 years old, actually. And it was not the divine aspect that I thought about as much. Interestingly, it was the best public speech I've ever seen in my entire life. I was selling knives. We went to Banff, Canada. The top salesman and all these people had this amazing event. This Catholic public speaker came up, who's a motivational speaker, and he gave this talk about achievement and success. And he talked about communication and intimacy. And hear me out here. So intimacy, a lot of times we equate with sex, but he was saying, no, sex can be without intimacy, and you can have intimacy without sex, and you can, both, whatever, right? And he was saying that real intimacy is about self-revelation. And what he meant by that was, it's me revealing myself to you and you revealing yourself to me. And it's not just like what you had for dinner, how nice it was to walk your dog today in the nice weather, but it's like your deepest fundamental beliefs, values, fears, dreams, aspirations, and it's in a sense who you are and the things that are important to you. And that's how I first got introduced to the topic of revelation, is the idea that it's this thing about yourself, right? And it's revealing yourself. And then we could talk later, more about the divine aspect that I grew into as I grew up. But I think like grounding it in that for me was very pivotal. Grounding it in, it's about the self and revealing yourself, which, when you bring up like literature, I mean, you think about like, a lot of stories, but take for instance, Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, where part of the whole problem with her intimacy with the two other characters and with Melanie. Thank you, Mellie. And she always calls her Mellie. And with those characters is a problem she has with understanding her own deepest values. She doesn't understand what she truly loves in that story. And that's part of it is realizing how different she is and also what she loves. And, there's the big revelation of her love at the very end of that novel, which is a knockout blow. I've read that a couple times. That's a great
example that then at the end of the novel, the revelation that she has, whether you're watching a movie or or reading the novel, or reading a novel, that this is something that, oh, wow, this matters to me. And I hadn't realized that all along. It was what it mattered. It was the thing that mattered to me. So you're using, when you're talking about self-revelation, the idea of revelation in a very interesting way, which is that there's something outside of somebody else that there's something. So if you're the partner and you're and somebody's revealing themselves to you, it's like they're disrobing their soul and you are seeing more of them. And this was a kind of a bit of a surprise to me to find out about more the religious meaning of revelation, where in a way it's God who has pulled back the curtain, opened up the robe to reveal himself in some form. And often revelations are accompanied by some kind of miracle that happens. So that caught me a little bit by surprise, because I always have thought of a revelation as something internal that you think of, that dawns on you. And
I think that they're both true.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to share a little story that kind of goes along with that kind of revelation, where it's something that's supposed to open up and you're wanting it to open up. And this is actually kind of a striving for a religious experience when I was a kid.
Okay.
So when I was 10, 11, my parents started sending my sister and I to a Methodist church. And it was the first time we'd really gone to church before. Growing up prior to that, we hadn't been very religious. And we'd go to these youth group meetings, and I would see in moments of prayer and a lot of the other children starting to cry and to feel something very powerful and emotional in these moments. And I didn't cry. And I felt like, what's going on? I want to have this experience, this powerful experience that they're having. I remember lying in bed, and this is probably when I'm like 9 years old, lying in bed, trying to convince myself that I believe in God. So I'd say, okay, now I believe in God. I believe in him. And then there'd be kind of back in the back of my head, this voice that said, no, you don't. Nothing has been revealed to you. I was striving for this powerful revelation from God to let me know that I had a connection there. And it never materialized for me. So that idea of a revelation that is mystical is something that I've seen in art, but never been able to experience myself. And I've been trying to figure out, maybe not all the time, but off and on throughout the rest of my life, okay, what would it mean to have a kind of revelation that I do feel, that is real, that is like seeing God, though not seeing God? I don't know. Does that make sense, Kirk?
Well, I had the same exact experience when I was a kid, by the way, with church. And I didn't go very often either, but we would go and I would, for me, I actually went, I'm an only child, as I said last episode, and I went just to be with friends, right? I went to their church with them. But I had the same experience where I would look around and it seemed like all the adults and even some of the kids were really into it. And, the conclusion I came to was, I think there's only two conclusions you come to, like that you don't have the revelation, right? It's like, if you don't get the revelation, what's the old saying? For those who know, no explanation is necessary. For those who don't, none is possible. I think there's, when you realize, right? When it comes to you that it's revealed to you that you're not going to have that revelation, you have two options. You either think something's wrong with you or something's wrong with them. And I said something's wrong with them. That was my kind of, or at least
I said something's wrong with me.
Oh, you did? Okay. So that's a big difference. I was like, something's going on over there. Like, they're just making this up, man. Like, this is because
me, right? Yeah. And like, we could talk about our relationship with religion a lot, I think. But I want to go back to those religious artworks, because I think I want to make a point clear. I love those works. I love Michelangelo's Moses. I love Caravaggio's, is it St. Peter who falls off his horse, or one of them who falls off his horse, being struck like that, because that's an experience I want. I want that orgasmic experience of truth that St. Teresa has. So,
and I think that's a really important thing for art lovers. I said this all the time on my other show about the importance of not cutting out art or music or poetry or literature just because the theme or the experience is religious. Like, I know a lot of
kind of
anything
explicit ideology that you don't
agree with.
However, I want to give a caveat that everybody's got their personal reactions to art. And if there's something you're like, I can't get past that because it just reminds me of some trauma in my life, whatever it is, then fine, good.
That's a good point.
It's not, but if it's something that's you
if it's not traumatic,
look beyond, if you can look at the more abstract idea.
Because I'm agreeing with what you're saying, basically, that there is something so powerful about these religious concepts that are, I think, like, we don't get to experience them if we're not religious. We don't get to feel them, or at least that's what it's been in the monopoly of religion for so long. And part of what we have to do as secular people.
I'm seeing a shirt that you have on right now with a depiction of an artwork of a figure standing at the top of a temple with a sunrise.
This is my
They're
quick
having a religious experience. Yeah. And I'm betting that it's spiritual but not religious.
Yeah.
So go into this idea of, okay, what does secular revelation look like? And I want to give you a couple of examples from movies. I love that one from Gone with the Wind. And there are two that I want to give, one that's probably not very known and maybe one that's a little bit more known. And I'll give them both and then maybe extrapolate from that. So one is from the movie American Gangster. And it's Denzel Washington, a Russell Crowe movie, and one of the subplots, so it's not one of the main plots, so not spoiling too much here, is this cop, Russell Crowe, is just lives his life for being a cop, and he's going through a divorce, and he's got a kid, and he's not at home, and there's child custody, and he's been fighting to keep his child. And then in the courtroom, something happens, and I'm not going to say what, but something happens for him to suddenly stop and say, you know what, Judge, this child needs to be with his mom, not with me. And it's such a 180 unexpected turn that you don't realize it's coming, and it comes at such a moment where it's counterintuitive to what's going on, because he's been trying to fight for keeping a hold of custody of his child, and then he suddenly says this is not the right thing to do. It's there's that kind of moment of revelation. So you got that example. And then the other one that I think even more powerfully, and it's stuck with me and it's kind of influenced the way I've seen revelation in my own life, is from the television show Mad Men.
I never saw that.
The main character, Don Draper, is a New York ad guy in the 1960s. and a lot of the episodes surround, okay, how are you going to create an ad pitch for the company that you're trying to sell something for? And even at the end of the pilot episode, where he's trying to come up with an ad pitch for some cigarette brand, and he's got nothing. And then in the big final meeting, he's got nothing. And they turn to him and he's like flipping pages. And then suddenly it dawns on him. And it's a completely different direction. And it's a revelation. It's something that comes to him and it is a revelation to everybody else. It's like, whoa, that is the direction to go into. And there are powerful moments like that where there's this clairvoyance, this amazing, in the middle of this, things aren't going the way they're supposed to be going, or it's kind of goes off in a different direction where you understand now. It's clear, and it comes so suddenly. And the more powerful ones are when it's not just, okay, I see this, I understand something new, but then it's deeply meaningful to you. So there's another kind of revelatory moment for him at another one of these ad pitch meetings in the final episode of the first season, that then kind of gives himself insight on what matters in his life, a little bit like in the Gone with the Wind example.
Yeah.
So those examples of you're not there yet, you don't know what it is, you might not even be thinking about that particular thing, and then in a flash there's a connection that your mind makes that is joyous, that is exciting, that clarifies things. And so that is the kind of example that I've really held on to, because I found out that that's the way that I use the word revelation. When I think about revelation, I think about my little discoveries as I'm working on something, and then suddenly, oh, this could apply to this problem in my life. And it could be something completely different. And it could be very important, or it could be minor. There are various degrees. But I love having revelation moments.
You're talking about the eureka moment, right?
And you know what? Not quite. Maybe a little bit like the eureka moment. But the eureka moment, maybe it's like the Isaac Newton moment as well, where the apple falls on his head. You have that in the brain, and maybe that kind of like that, and it's suddenly, oh, there's a moment of inspiration. But even even more where the revelation takes you to something, a different facet of your life. Whatever you're working on now does not seem to compare to what it is that you have an insight for.
Well, this is going to be important to my poem later, by the way, because what you're hitting on is the idea of what I would consider like the essence of creativity and imagination, the idea of putting together things that you never would have imagined together, right? Like, and there's a kind of, there's a combination, there's a putting it, like creativity, that's the feeling of, oh, I never knew they were going to be like this. And, like that in terms of like painting something, or I'm writing a story right now, and it just hit me what I'm going to do with this character. And it took a lot of thinking and, walking around and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then same thing with myself is like thinking about my own personality and values. And there's a moment that it's like, it hits me of, oh, okay, it's this, right? Or it's because I love this so much, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's a lot more that I'd love to share, but I think we should go on, and I'll share with you the painting that I have, and we can kind of continue the discussion there. Are you ready, Kirk, for a painting, to be surprised by a painting?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me share my screen with you. Oh, you can pause the recording here because host disabled. All right. So I'm sharing with you a painting now, Kirk, and as we've done before, would you give a quick title and see what happens with that? All right, here it is.
Oh, astronomer.
And you say astronomer because it sounds like you're familiar with this painting.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of people who might be listening to this podcast are familiar with this.
I know there's two. I don't think this is the astronomer. This is the other one, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's first, right. I guess like contemplation would be the first word if I were just seeing this for the first time. And I have to say, I've never really like analyzed it deeply. So it'll be fun to do that. But I've seen this painting a lot, to be honest.
Describe and try kind of imagine what's going on here. Describe a little bit of the story. Maybe even put yourself in his place. So what do you see, Kirk?
He's got, what's the name of that tool in his hand? I used it in 8th grade.
Oh, protractor, right?
Protractor, thank you. I'm not a math I'm not a math guy. So he's got that thing in his hand that, from smart math people. So he's got a protractor in his hand, and it looks in his right hand, and I think in his left hand, is that a book? Or is he just holding the edge of
maybe.
table?
Who knows?
I can't tell what so he's maybe holding the edge of his table, his arm with the protractor is, he's leaning on it, and he's looking out the window, right? And it looks like he's contemplating something. He's thinking about some problem that he's probably working on. There's paper in front of him. And then there's a rumpled piece of cloth on the table in front of him. So it's kind of, things are a little bit in disarray. I could see a kind of a piece of paper or parchment behind him, kind of rolled up on the ground a little bit. And, there's a globe on the desk next to some books. But again, I think that's the essence of what's going on. And it's, I've been in this position a lot where it's like you're just sitting there, and the look on his face is interesting. So he's,
I just zoomed in a little further.
Right? Yeah. He's like, it's like that moment when you're like, and you're not noticing that your mouth is agape, right?
Yeah, you know what? That's true. I think that might be the very first time I've really noticed that his mouth is kind of slightly parted there.
Yeah, and he's concentrating, but it's that unself-conscious concentration where he seems like he's not familiar with what's going on. He's really in his. You could tell. It looks like he's seeing through his mind's eye. Is what
that's a great way to describe it. Seeing through his mind's eye. So he's not staring down at the paper or using that protractor at the moment. Whatever task he's been doing with what's the papers in front of him and measuring distances, geographer stuff between land masses or so forth, he's not doing that now.
Yeah.
Something has turned his attention to staring out the window. Now, is it something outside the window that he's looking by? Is there some commotion going on, or is there a beautiful woman who's walking by? What do you think?
Could it be the sun itself? I don't think there's a beautiful woman. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you could definitely have this look when you see a beautiful woman that distracts you from your work, for sure. I could
like
definitely
that.
see like, oh wow. Like, so yes, I can see that, but there's something, I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong completely and be, missing something. My impression is that he's looking up from his work and he's contemplating what he's just been doing. And and it's kind of putting it together in his mind. Right.
Yeah, I love the way you described what's going on is in his mind's eye. So with this painting, anybody who likes Jan Vermeer will recognize this painting. It's a geographer, right?
Geographer.
So not the astronomer, the geographer. But contrasting this one to the astronomer is interesting because the astronomer is actually looking down at what he's doing and trying to figure stuff out.
That's right.
So you've got him, and this is, I might be looking and seeing a lot of stuff here, but this one is the artwork that I think connects to something I've described a lot of before, kind of putting something together in your mind that is not necessarily completely tied to what you're trying to figure out at the moment.
Yeah.
And there is some implication of that thought that applies to a new realm of life, or a different question that is kind of exciting to you. And I love that close-up has him with his mouth parted, because that you're thinking it could be a face of he's seeing a beautiful woman outside. There is a kind of, oh wow, that's pretty cool look about him, isn't there? If you were to describe, if you were to say what quote he would be saying right now, what thought would be going through his mind, what would you say?
Well, but I think we're maybe seeing it slightly different.
Well, no. But go ahead, answer that, and then we could talk about it. But what quote?
Yeah,
because I think that will share.
You've probably thought about it longer. I mean,
no, I haven't.
I mean,
is he saying like this is a tough problem? That mouth part, it doesn't suggest that. There's no struggle in his face, is there?
I mean, what I see is what I was saying earlier about there is a kind of what's that?
About seeing in his mind's eye, right?
Yeah, I mean, in his mind's eye, but there is a kind of, you're right. I see a little bit of a squint, like he is looking at a specific object.
Yeah, forget about that. I'm gonna read into this artwork what I want to. I'm not seeing anything he's looking at.
That's possible. I mean, it could be something like, don't forget, like almost a reminder, don't forget that the world is not on this parchment, the world is out there. Right? Like it's looking up to say, like,
is he thinking, is that what he's saying to himself?
No, maybe.
No, I don't think he's saying that to himself. He's not saying that to himself.
I'm really baffled by what he's saying to himself.
I mean, him saying to himself, oh, this is how it connects to that.
Sure. Okay. I could see that. I mean, I can see that as well, like the mind's eye. I'm just trying to think, like, when I'm in that position, like if I'm, at my house or I'm, at a coffee shop, and it's like I'm writing something and, again, you make a connection about a character development or action. You didn't think, oh, I didn't think they would be this type of person. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of, you look up and then, I'm off. My mind is like in 100 different fantasies about what this person could be doing, what he's going to say. Oh, he's going to come up to this character and that character is going to punch him in the face now because he said the wrong thing. Right. And it's like, all of a sudden I see a world that I didn't see before.
Mm-hmm. And I really like that you're connecting it to like that moment. I'm seeing you right now in the coffee shop have that experience with a look like that.
I mean, I'll say one thing. I have, because I write at coffee shops, or I used to, so quite often, there are a lot of times when I'm pretty sure other people in the coffee shop thought I was insane, because I would just be like, look up and just stare for a long time.
And that goes back to that word that you use, unself-conscious.
You're and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm staring at this person. And I didn't mean to, like, I'm not intending to do it. And they're like, why are you looking at me?
So for me, this artwork captures that kind of experience that I've had more and more as my thinking has become clearer. I've gained more knowledge, and I have lots and lots of questions in the back of my mind. And those questions aren't immediately answered when I ask them, but sometimes I get glints of answers to them as I go along. Questions about relationships, about my career, about how the mind works, about the purpose of art, and all these types of things. And they get answered in some way as I'm doing something else, and maybe it feels like that it's sudden and inspiration, but it's the subconscious working back there to help create a connection. And boom, there we go.
A lot of writers, their advice is to do something else rather than keep working on the project. Like if you get stuck.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're talking about?
A little bit. Okay.
The
difference here is that he is in the middle of the work, and it's the work that he loves to do, but the work that he loves to do is also spurring some bigger not realizations, revelations. If he were, and this is the Facebook post I posted, was like, what's the difference between a realization and a revelation? I think a realization would be more him looking at his maps and realizing, oh, wow, America's very far from Europe. I didn't think it was going to be 7,000 miles. I thought it was going to be more like 3,000 miles. And it's a kind of discovery in the process of doing something. And I see the revelation as more of a discovery, not about the thing that you're doing, but about something else that is outside of what it is that you're doing right now. And so he's been doing this measurement stuff, and then there's a new discovery and that connects.
But it's a new discovery about geography in this case.
It could be a discovery about geography. It could be a discovery about
anything,
women or anything, but something prompted him to have this revelation about something.
Let me contrast it. Could it be something like, and don't laugh at me, but could it be something like, did I leave the door unlocked?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Right.
No,
so it can't be something like that, but it could be something like,
not with
maybe that's why she left me.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think it could be that either? Okay.
Oh, so maybe if it has something to do with what he's been working on.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so maybe like I work too much. Maybe that's why she left me.
Yeah.
Right. So it could be that kind of realization.
I don't think that's the case here, because I'm looking at his look, and that's a pleasurable look that he's got. I want that look that he's got.
Yeah, I see something it's more the revelation about his work. It's more about maybe, how it relates to the world, or he makes some geographical principle. He's formulating a geographical principle that he hadn't had before.
Sure. All right. So I think that's plenty of discussion of the artwork. I'm curious to see about the poem now. I've just glanced through the poem. I'm also very curious in the Facebook group for those who want to comment on the artwork. I'll post the artwork, and what do you see in it? Are you guys seeing what I see in it? Okay. So Kirk, will you surprise me with a poem?
Let's do it. I'm going to share screen as well, although I know you have your own copy. So this is a section, a small little snippet of the epic poem by William Wordsworth, The Prelude. And the Prelude was published in 1850, and a lot of historians put it as the end of the Romantic era. Now, I'm not going to talk about all that. I know is not important, but what I think is helpful is this is the last book of this epic poem. And this is one stanza, one kind of longer stanza in that poem. And the main thing you need to understand is that they're going to a place, and I sent you, Luke, and I'll put this in the Facebook group, some images of Mount Snowdon. And this is a very famous moment in this book, because he's remembering
Do we
before
call it Edward
this.
Now?
What's that?
Do we call it Edward now?
Edward.
That's a terrible joke.
Sorry, I don't.
Edward Snowden. That's the only Snowden I know.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Edward Snowden. Sorry.
Edit that out.
I just wasn't there.
Don't really
I wasn't.
edit it out.
Yeah. I wasn't there. No, it's just staying in. So they're a group of travelers. He was 21. He's writing this in his like late 20s, early 30s. But when he's remembering when he was 21, he went to Mount Snowdon in Wales on one of his many excursions and travels.
He liked to do those.
He loved to do those. And he walks with these band, and that's the main thing you need to know is they're walking in the middle of the night to get really early in the morning to the top of Mount Snowdon, which is the highest peak in Wales, to see the sunrise. That's the whole point of this excursion. And then let me read. This is only the third stanza of the final book of the prelude.
How long is this prelude?
The prelude is like longer than it's a little bit longer than Milton's Paradise Lost. Like
I don't know what that means.
I don't know the number of lines off the top of my head. Thousands.
Okay.
A couple thousands of lines.
Lots of pages. So this is a portion of that.
It's hard for me to say because I have a book. This you can't see it, but this is the book. But this has both the 1805 and the 1850 side by side. He has two versions.
Got it.
So it's probably 300 pages.
Poets did a lot of rewriting.
250, 300. Yeah, if anybody's interested, I will talk your ear off about Wordsworth, but we won't get into that now.
All right.
About and his tinkering.
Okay, so
let's read the poem. Just so you get an idea, I wanted you to know that think of them traveling. It's the middle of the night.
Got it.
Okay.
Wait. Who is he with again?
Just a band of travelers. A fellow traveler. Just think of them as fellow travelers right now.
Got it.
Okay. Here we go. With forehead bent earthward, as if in opposition set against an enemy, I panted up with eager pace and no less eager thoughts. Thus might we wear perhaps an hour away, ascending at loose distance each from each.
That doesn't sound like so. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. Oh man. Okay. This is a part where if you want to like cut and restart.
Wait, what happened?
No, because a joke came into my mind, and I don't want to interrupt you while you're reading. So no.
Let's try it again.
I was going to make a joke about social distancing there, and loose distancing is not enough.
Make the joke afterward. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. No, I apologize.
It's okay. No problem.
Go ahead.
All right, here we go. With forehead bent earthward, as if in opposition set against an enemy, I panted up with eager pace and no less eager thoughts. Thus might we wear perhaps an hour away, ascending at loose distance each from each. I gotta do it again.
Yeah. So this is what's gonna happen. So let's, even if you make a mistake, go through it.
I'm just gonna go through it. Okay.
Yeah.
But now I'm in my head is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in your head now.
All right. Let's try this one more time. Mm-hmm. Not stop it. With forehead bent earthward, as if in opposition set against an enemy, I panted up with eager pace and no less eager thoughts. Thus might we wear perhaps an hour away, ascending at loose distance each from each. And I, as chanced the foremost of the band, when at my feet the ground appeared to brighten, and with a step or two seemed brighter still. Nor had I time to ask the cause of this, for instantly a light upon the turf fell like a flash. I looked about, and lo, the moon stood naked in the heavens at height immense above my head, and on the shore I found myself of a huge sea of mist, which meek and silent rested at my feet. 100 hills their dusky backs upheaved all over this still ocean. And beyond, far, far beyond, the vapors shot themselves in headlands, tongues, and promontory shapes into the sea. The real sea that seemed to dwindle and give up its majesty, usurped upon as far as sight could reach. Meanwhile, the moon looked down upon this show in single glory, and we stood, the mist touching our very feet. And from the shore, at distance, not the third part of a mile, was a blue chasm, a fracture in the vapor, a deep and gloomy breathing place through which mounted the roar of waters, torrents, streams, innumerable, roaring with one voice. The universal spectacle throughout was shaped for admiration and delight, grand in itself alone, but in that breach through which the homeless voice of waters rose, that dark, deep thoroughfare, had nature lodged the soul, the imagination of the whole.
All right. I really, really like this poem, Kirk. So just hearing it for the first time from you, I'm seeing a lot of it. My first impression was that it was the kind of mystical, natural revelation. All these fantastical things were happening, and it's not fantastical. It just feels fantastical. So here's my brief summary. He's walking up this mountain with his friends, and then suddenly there are different elements from nature that hit him: the moonlight, the mist, the waves crashing up against the shore and the rocks of the shore, and all that feels like it's something that is revelatory to him.
Yeah. And I, again, I encourage you to Google Mount Snowdon images. I think for me, it really helps because some of them, like when you get up there and he's talking about the sea of mist and how it kind of usurps the majesty of the real sea in a sense. Because, for as far as he can see, as far as you could see, you get these valleys, these hills and valleys in front of him. And it's kind of like my shirt that you were pointing out, and I'll try to put an image on Facebook of this person standing at a peak of something, right? And he's looking over, but it's not an actual sea, it's a sea of mist. And it makes him think of something. Like this moment makes him come to some deep realization. And the poem has more to say. The prelude has a lot more to say about this. This is a moment, and I chose it mostly because of what you said, and then a little bit about he touches on it with that last couple lines there.
Before we get to the last couple of lines, Kirk, there's just some confusion on my part. You said it's a sea of mist, so there's not the ocean that's around?
Well, the ocean is far in the distance, so let's read that section.
Okay.
Nor had I time to ask the cause of this. So one of the things is he's walking.
Wait, I'm sorry. I want to make sure that I know where you are. And may I read it?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Sorry, so you don't have to hear it from me. So start. Can you see the highlighted?
Yeah.
So let's try and start around there.
Nor had I time to ask the cause of this, for instantly a light upon the turf fell like a flash. I looked about, and lo, the moon stood naked in the heavens at height immense above my head. And just tell me when to stop. Right now, this is the moon that's reflecting on the ground that he sees.
That's the pivotal change right there.
Yeah, exactly. But let's see. So, and on the shore, I found myself of a huge sea of mist, which meek and silent rested at my feet, and 100 hills their dusky backs upheaved all over the still ocean. Okay, so that still ocean is describing that sea of mist. So the backs of the hills, the dusky.
But it's not a real ocean. He's going to talk about the real sea in a minute.
No, this makes me think of that painting, The Wanderer.
The Wanderer,
and it's the complete title is The Wanderer Above a Sea of Fog. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a very English thing, I think, that you're going to get. At least from what I've seen in images, haven't been there. But yeah, that's an important moment, and he's looking at this sea of mist, and if you go through this carefully, look at all the touch, see, hear language in there. He says the word see, look, view, like the senses play a pivotal role in all of Wordsworth, but in particularly here, and I think this has to do partly with the revelation part. For me, and my understanding of it.
Also,
well, do you want to keep going through? Or do you want me to express it now?
So let's keep going through. But can you express? Because I think what you're describing right now applies to everything. So how does the sensation apply? How is that part of his revelatory experience?
As simply as I can put it, his goal with his work and what's going on here is not only to kind of just use pretty language. He is literally trying to teach you and inspire you to see, And he thinks that when he looks at a waterfall, when he looks at the top of Mount Snowdon, when he's standing there and he looks through his eyes, because he's trained his senses, he sees differently than you would. And that's not something that you can't achieve. He believes you and I and every individual can achieve it, but he does not believe it's automatic. He believes that the combination, as he puts it, the soul, the imagination of the whole, it's this imagining process that is important to gaining that kind of revelatory moment that happens when he has his head down. He's kind of
okay. All right. This seems like the crux of what you're saying, and I'm a little bit confused. So he's trying to guide you through. You can see more clearly and I'm going to teach you how to see more clearly by making this very sensual, and that's going to help you to have more of a revelation when you're on your own. Is that it?
Yeah, to some degree, because this is something that's a little bit foreign to us, but so they did not think, or Wordsworth did not think, that the senses were necessarily automatic, or at least what we may, call the concepts. So when you look at nature, what you need to be doing is, I think you need to be trained not just to see brown, red, sky. You need to see something that also reveals something about yourself. And it's coming from your mind, right? It's not just reality hitting you. It's also you looking out into the world through your own senses and your imagination. And that's your soul. And he's choosing these very secular, natural, look out into reality. Here's all these things. And from the shore at a distance, not a third of part of a mile, was a blue chasm. And he's giving you these visual ways to look at things. Because one way to think about it is think about how most people would describe their experience at Mount Snowdon.
Yeah, it's a nice park. There were trees, and I think I'm seeing something now that the last 6 lines of the poem. I'm wondering if these lines capture what it is that you're talking about. That bringing yourself and being more aware of the sensuality of your experience with nature leads to a more powerful revelation. So those last 6 lines are: the universal spectacle throughout was shaped for admiration and delight, grand in itself alone, but in that breach through which the homeless voice of waters rose, that dark, deep thoroughfare, had nature lodged the soul, the imagination of the whole. So is that saying, this was fantastic, but in order to fully experience this as a kind of revelatory moment, you've got to bring your soul to it?
I think you have to bring your soul to it, is definitely what he's saying. And notice how he's talking about voice of nature, right? And the homeless voice of waters, like they need a home, right? And he talks about right above that, and mounted the roars of waters, torrents, streams, innumerable, roaring with one voice. So it's like nature is like a god speaking to you in a sense. And you have to kind of, I guess, tune yourself to being able to hear what this nature, what reality outside of yourself is saying. And that is what he's trying to show you in most of his work. This is like one little taste of what he does.
Okay. So I'm trying to put together what is being revealed here to this this traveler walking up the mountain. What is the revelation that he's having?
I think the revelation, it's hard to put it in just this one stanza, the revelation, because the revelation goes on the next section that I didn't include because I thought it was a little too long. Mm-hmm. But a meditation rose in me that night upon the lonely mountain when the scene had passed away, and it appeared to me the perfect image of a mighty mind, of one that feeds upon infinity. And what he's going to go on to say, and I'll just kind of wrap it up like understanding this, the whole theme and his project of the prelude, and I think you get a small snippet taste of it here, is that he is actually writing the first real autobiography of in poetry. And what he's doing, and his theme is the growth of an individual mind. And he's trying to show you that these are the images, the moments that came up to developing my own soul, my senses. And here's how I did it, to kind of give you a sense of how you can do it too. But it happens through this power of sense. And I think what he's trying to say here is like, and he does this in Tintern Abbey, probably his most famous poem, is that there's this voice of nature that you have to be able to hear, but you have to train yourself. And it is similar to what religionists say. And that's why I think there's kind of...
So this is helping me recall what you were saying before about the romantics' goal to try to bring religion,
and I don't think they succeeded. That's why part
religion.
Of this is so confusing, is because I do think they didn't succeed fully. But now, what I love about them is their ambition. Yeah. But go ahead.
I want to make sure I understand correctly what the revelation that he's having. Is it that later, that after this experience, he sees everything that's going on as a metaphor for the mind?
For his mind, yeah, and for what the mind is capable of. So he believes he believes most people don't do this. Just like, if I work out and I can lift 500 pounds and you can't, that's because you didn't train. It's not because it's not possible to you. And it's the same thing with him. He believes that, when most people, the example I used in the past, is most people look at a waterfall, they only think beautiful is when it's a raging waterfall. But he says, you're not looking at it correctly, because sometimes when it's, even in a drought and it's trickling, then it has a shimmer and there's like mist coming over here and you could see the trees in the background better and you don't hear the roar so much that it deafens the rest of nature, right?
Okay.
So his point is like, this is how to look at nature. Yeah. And that's why he has so much sensual language, is this is how to look at the world.
I'm getting that. And now what I'm doing is I'm comparing this kind of revelation, or what's different about this kind of revelation versus the revelation in the painting.
Yeah.
Because the revelation in the painting, he's not going someplace. In fact, the revelation that he's having may not be tied to the thing that he's doing. So it sounds like what's going on with the poem is this is going out to this place is a source of possible revelation. So go find a place where you can maybe have a revelation, because it's just going to create a certain environment for you and have you have these experiences that are going to be spiritual, metaphysical. And
I think it's not just going there, though. Just like with the geographer, it's not him like just walking around, and he's also doing the work. I think that's a similarity between them. He's doing work on geography, on the theory. He's got his protractor. He's got his globe in the background. He's doing the work. He is a geographer, right? Just like Wordsworth is doing the work to look. He's not passively looking around.
No, yeah, but
like a cow.
It's
right?
Interesting that we have the geographer in Vermeer, and we have a person who is going out and exploring.
Going out into nature.
Yeah. So there are two different kinds of revelations that are kind of suggested there. One is you go out and find a place that might stimulate the thoughts. Now you put in the work to pay attention and to be aware. But it's go to that place, and you meet a little bit like the reason why churches are so beautiful. And even when I walk into like a cathedral in France, Notre Dame, when it's still, before the fire, you get this sense of spirituality. And so you have now this sense of spirituality by going out to nature, and this. But
let me ask you something actually before.
Let me finish this thought here by comparing it to the geographer. Okay. So you got the geographer who's having this revelation, but not in a place that might induce some spiritual feeling surrounding him. It could. It's his office with his work around him, but it's still more mundane kind of every day, and then suddenly he sees in his mind's eye something that's, oh wow, there's this amazing connection. Does that make sense?
I mean, I see what you're saying, but I'm going to challenge it to be a little bit. I think there's a nuance that's important here, because the geographer's not like sitting in front of a fire and thinking about, he's actually doing his work. And I think that's critical. It'd be different if he was, again, sitting in a fire or standing out, just kind of throwing rocks on a lake, and then, whoa, and I have a revelation, which is different, by the way, than what's the St. Francis of Assisi painting, that famous one where he's purposely putting himself, if you ever see that painting, you have, of course, he's purposely putting himself.
Lots of versions of it.
Okay, but I'll have to find the one that I was trained on by, I think, Diane
But he goes
Durante.
he's out in nature, and he receives a stigmata out in the spiritual experience.
It's not even in nature. He's blocked himself off, and at least in the one I'm thinking of, he's blocked himself off from civilization. And then, yes, and the way the painting has it is like he's back on his heels. He looks up, and he's looking in the same direction as the cows or whatever, right? They're all looking as though they're able to have that without their mind, which I think is a big part of, much of the religious kind of viewpoints that happened in the past. These guys are like actually...
who are you talking about, these guys?
St. Francis. Oh, sorry. Okay. These guys, as in Wordsworth and the geographer. And so, I mean, here's one way to look at it is like, for you, this is the question I want to ask you, Luke, like when you were just getting started with looking at paintings, I'm sure, because I've had this experience, and I know you, but I bet you've had an experience where you looked at a painting and you looked and it just didn't do much for you. But then eventually you looked at that painting and it, did something for you when you came back with maybe more of your own, the method that you have now, right?
Sure.
And, there's a linguist, Richard Mitchell, that I like. And he has this thing where he says, like, we have this view that we can learn, for instance, we could teach kids through just watching TV and movie. This was a big movement back in the 60s that you could use multimedia to teach kids versus doing more reading. And he said that, you could, like, if you had the most ignorant person look at the moon, they're not going to come up with much to say about the moon. But if you have Newton look at the moon or Galileo, they can write volumes. And that's because of the work. And I really think the work is a really critical, putting in the work to have these revelations is something you as an individual can do. And I think that's what I get for the geographer. And that's definitely what I get from Wordsworth.
I can see that. I think the way I'm thinking about it is I'm going to take a little vacation in the next few days and go out into the mountains. And that's going to be more of my Wordsworth experience, looking for revelations. I'm going to go into places that are going to be conducive to letting my mind free and wander and reflect and contemplate. And hoping that when I come back and I'm back at my desk, that my mind is fresh again to have more of the kinds of revelations that are in the geographer, where I'm working at something and then suddenly the dominoes fall and I get more of that. So for me, it's that's the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
Where do I go to inspire revelation versus the particular moments I have in revelation while I'm doing something that might be related to it?
And I think that's a great distinction. My distinction is just the work part of it. That if you
compared to CC and passive.
Yeah. And well, but what I'm saying is, like, for you going to that world of your vacation and going out in nature, if you had, a steel rod through your brain, you wouldn't have the same experience as someone who was trained to, like, look at nature in a certain way. You could see the beauty of, a bower, right? Because you've read poetry and oh, that's a beautiful place for two lovers to, chat and spend time together. Whereas most people, that's just a shady, dirty, rough place, right? And that kind of elevation is how I think of you putting in the work. And then, yeah, I see your distinction of when you come back, you have new material in a sense. Or even if you don't do it consciously, but it's just partly there for living, that when you do your work, you might have some new revelation.
All right. So I'm very curious to hear what kinds of revelations, secular or otherwise, the Facebook group audience has, and maybe where they have their revelations. So I feel like there's a lot more to think about, but I really like this topic because they're wonderful moments to have when something clicks, and if it's especially a profound and emotional kind of clicking that you have.
Yes.
That's a strange way of putting it.
Well, but it is it feels like something's coming together. Yeah. Right, like you're putting an IKEA chair together and it clicks together, a puzzle, and it
there you go.
In.
A revelation is making sure you can put an IKEA drawer together. Okay,
that's
great.
Right.
So for next time, Kirk, when we have a special guest, what topics are we going to have?
Yeah, so next week we're going to, and we'll put this up to vote today or tomorrow. Passion is one, discrimination, self-creation, which
passion.
we actually touched on today, I think, a little bit, or I did. I don't know if you saw that.
That we could talk more about that. I feel more today with like the result of it, self-creation rather than the act of self-creation. So 100%. Passion, discrimination. That's
discrimination.
Intriguing.
Yeah, that'll be a difficult one, I think, for me.
And self-creation. Passion, discrimination, and self-creation. And I'll give a hint. The special guest is an artist themselves. So that's we'll name that special guest soon enough. But those are the 3 topics that she picked out. And I'll be curious to see what the Facebook group votes for.
All right,
Kirk, this was fun. Thanks for sharing in this revelatory discussion. And
for sure.
Look forward to doing this again soon.
Thank you, everybody.